So the Game Awards 2023 just wrapped up, and it went on for almost 4 hours. At least that's how long we were streaming it for. And I did manage to record the stream as we were watching it because, of course, it got crushed with different copyright claims and stuff and just kind of pulled down. But I wanted to go over some of the announcements that were made because there were some pretty good surprises here, especially from one company in particular. And I thought we would go over some of that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. I also realized that this wasn't going to make it into Newswave tomorrow morning, so why not go over some of my thoughts and impressions on some of the games that were revealed here. As for Game of the Year, Baldur's Gate 3 won it. I think that's what most people figured going into this event, but hey, you never know. There could have been a surprise with Alan Wake 2, Zelda, or Resident Evil 4, right? I mean, really, it was such a good year for games. Anything I feel like in that category could have ended up winning Game of the Year. But some of the stuff that did get shown here, right off the top, God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. It's DLC for God of War Ragnarok, and it was surprising to see this for one big reason, I guess we can say, but apparently it's a roguelike game. It kind of looked to me sort of like it was going to be almost a tower-based thing where you just go through different rooms and they'll have certain enemies and bosses maybe picked out for you, and you just kind of go as far as you can throughout each run, basically, right? And the thing that surprised me, one, it's out next week on December 12th, but two, it's free. It sounds weird because it's Sony and people are used to paying, like a $10 upcharge or something. So I think that was a really fun surprise to have that. We've heard that there was some kind of downloadable content, maybe one that's a bit more substantial than this in development. And maybe there still is, and we can see that later on at some point. And maybe that ends up just being like a standalone game, kind of like Uncharted, how that had its like Lost Legacy, kind of thinking maybe God of War gets something around that. Hellblade 2, the reason I included this is because it was shown again, but still no release date. Just 2024. I don't know. It's very weird they keep showing it with no release date locked in yet. No Rest for the Wicked. This is from Moon Studios. That's the studio that's behind Ori. And this is a completely different tone and visual style and stuff than I would have expected from them. It's kind of this isometric action RPG. They mentioned they'll have more details to share March 1st, but I'm going to keep an eye on this one because Moon Studios, based on what I experienced with Ori, they put out some pretty quality games. So I'll see what they have for us with that next year with some sort of like digital event. They're going to do a showcase. Sega shows up, all right. They were sending out cards. I got one too, and I was kind of thinking, all right, well, the people they're sending this to, fighting game people and stuff on Twitch and YouTube, and then I get one, and I'm not into really fighting games like that. So it did kind of open my mind to the idea that maybe there's something else here. Maybe it's different than what I'm expecting, and it absolutely was. I don't think anyone went into the show expecting for Sega to announce 5 legacy IPs to be making a return. Now, this was more or less, hey guys, look what we have in the pipeline, and we'll see at some point with them. But the fact that they ran through a montage of Jet Grind Radio, Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, Shinobi, and Streets of Rage. And by the way, at the bottom, it says, and more. It's interesting because it does look like Sega is going back to their older properties, and they're going to try to bring them into the new age, if you will, back from, I mean, we're seeing like the Dreamcast being some of the more recent entries all the way back to like the Sega Genesis. So that's really exciting stuff. They said, and more. If I could think of one other game I wouldn't mind seeing them take a swing, like a swing at here with current systems, it's probably Comic Zone. I think that would do really well, even if they just kind of left it as a 2D style game and still put it in their RE engine, if you will. I think they could have a lot of fun with that release. And it was hard back then. People are still pretty happy and interested in very difficult games with things like a lot of the Souls-like games. So that's something to think of there. But yeah, it's really cool to see Sega have all these games in development. I hope they don't mess any of them up too bad, because I do think at least one of these games is going to try to go the route of live service kind of super game thing. So we'll see how that turns out. But it's fun to see Sega not only reference something like Jet Set Radio or Jet Grind Radio, but actively have something in development for it. Really cool stuff. Dragon Ball Tenkaichi 4 showed up. It is called Sparking Zero. We kind of figured based on some trademarks going around and how that's like the title in Japan for the series. So looks good. Visually speaking, I'm on board. They showed some shots of gameplay, but we still need a release date and all of this. So at least from what we're seeing right now, looks like kind of that old school Tenkaichi setup with the obviously a new twist on the visuals, and we'll see what else they have for us. Hopefully going into next year. Visions of Mana. So we had another trademark from Square with this one, and they're doing a whole new game in the Mana series, and that is awesome. After Trials of Mana, which I really enjoyed, I was hoping that they got the hint looking at that game and kind of the sales behind it, which were good, that they would go back and try something new and build it from the ground up rather than just say, okay, well, we're gonna go back to an older game and do like a remake style. No, this is brand new. Really, really fun stuff to see that happening, and 2024. So, I mean, we're right at the end of 2023. We could be 6 or 7 months out, say, for Visions of Mana, and I'll be all over that game when it releases. Rise of the Ronin got its release date March 22nd. Awesome. Really, really interested in this one. And that means it's 4 months away or so. Like, great. Really happy to see that release date be first quarter of 2024. Not something I have to wait till maybe the end of the year. Okay. Hideo Kojima shows up as expected. It's Jeff Keighley's show. But he comes out of a door that was very reminiscent of the door from PT. I don't know if that, I assume it was purposeful actually, because they did reveal OD, which is their Xbox game. We know, of course, Hideo Kojima working with Xbox to create a game that will be leveraging the quote-unquote power of the cloud or just cloud computing, which should be terrifying for everyone that Kojima will be able to harness the power of the cloud with Microsoft and all of their data centers. But here we are. However, this is, according to what was being discussed here with, by the way, Jordan Peele comes out of the door too. Hey, why not? I'm curious, more or less, because they showed a trailer and I don't know what's going on. I mean, that's the idea. Kojima shows things out of context, don't make a lot of sense to build up intrigue that way. Okay, I get it. Obviously a horror game based on what they're showing, but apparently it's a new form of media. Jordan Peele mentioned it's a game, it's a movie, it's somewhere in there. It's hard to describe, and well, that's what I expect from Kojima, and that's, to be honest, what I want anyway. Something weird. Make me like reevaluate games in general. And I know Death Stranding wasn't necessarily popular with everyone because it was, yes, I get it, a walking delivery simulator, but it was different. So that's what I expect from Kojima, and I'm very, very interested to see what exactly OD turns out to be. I did want to mention Black Myth Wukong did get its release date of August 20th. So that was a game that's been years in the making now, from our first time seeing it to finally getting to, okay, we now know when it's coming out. Originally when it was shown, people didn't think it was even like a real game, in the sense that what we were seeing is how it would look. But they showed another trailer. Still looks great. Still looks very weird. But hey, we're 8 months away from it, 9 months away. So I'll check that one out when it drops. I do want to point out that my favorite announcement, I know we had Sega with all these cool old school intellectual properties coming back, but the one that really, really has me thinking about the possibilities for it, even the relationship there, is Blade. So Arcane Leon is going to be doing this, and we just had Redfall, of course, come out, but that's from the other branch at Arcane. This would be the branch that handled something like Deathloop, and Deathloop is a game that's highly rated, and I enjoyed it. And they did mention Blade is a third-person, single-player, very important to note, single-player action-adventure game. I think this is a great idea. Now, this is Bethesda, of course, owned by Microsoft. So, yes, this is Xbox and their Marvel game. It's something I feel like they've had to figure out for a while, especially since Sony has Spider-Man and now Wolverine. I think Blade makes a ton of sense for a video. Obviously, we've had a Blade video game, but like to really look at and say, okay, how can we put some serious talent behind this series and create a really good game out of it? Awesome. Really curious to see what happens with Blade and Arcane Leon, but it's going to be a while. I'm thinking, gosh, we're just hearing it now, and they showed a very quick cinematic trailer for it. It might be 2026 or 2027. It's going to be a bit for this one, but something to definitely keep an eye on. Light No Fire. This seems like something that could get Hello Games into trouble again. You know, I feel like they would have learned their lesson from what happened with No Man's Sky, and maybe they have, and this game does deliver. Man, a lot of ambitious ideas being thrown out there on stage, a lot of promises being made just kind of on the fly, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess people will be a bit more cautious going into this one than what was going on with No Man's Sky, as they were more of an unknown. But this is, from what they were trying to describe and then what they showed, procedurally generated planet that will actually feel like the size of a planet. At least that's kind of what I was getting from this. Visually speaking, it's pretty impressive. I mean, No Man's Sky kind of got away with what it was doing from it just being very, very much procedurally generated. And in terms of like, what I mean getting away with it would be the file size, which is very small, but also kind of the more basic and standard visuals that it put out, especially when it first came out. I know it's gotten more and more complex as they've gone along, but Light No Fire looks like it's on a whole other level. All right. And, I feel like this is a game you're going to kind of just have your own adventure with apparently a bunch of people just all around you building up civilization. We'll see. We'll see how this one turns out. I hope it is good though, because No Man's Sky, when that came out, it was disastrous, and it took them 10 years, actually, it would be next year, 10 years to essentially get to where they are now with No Man's Sky. So I'd like to think that Light No Fire will get out of the gate a bit stronger, but it could be very impressive if it ends up working out, is what I'll say. And then Final Fantasy 16. So we do have DLC. This was rumored, actually expected, because they technically talked about it on stage at different events. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. So Echoes of the Fallen, you'll be fighting Omega, and after looking at the press release, you're also going to get Cloud's Buster Sword. So they're going to have some fun items and callbacks to other Final Fantasy games. This makes sense, by the way, since Rebirth is coming up here in actually just a couple months. Very exciting stuff. So why not have crossovers like that? But the one I'm really looking forward to is next year, and that's the Rising Tide, as we will be fighting Leviathan, which is probably the best fight in Final Fantasy 15. That's the biggest takeaway, was that battle. And I'm kind of thinking of the icons that we had, those massive battles with like Titan, for example. Think about the possibilities of Leviathan, especially since it's coming out summer 2024. To me, that seems like the part of the downloadable content that will get the most focus. And I'm expecting a pretty epic battle for that one. And then to close it out, the big reveal, Monster Hunter Wilds. It's the next big Monster Hunter game. It's something people have been waiting on really since Monster Hunter World. I know we have Rise, but this, I guess, would be more or less the next big AAA Monster Hunter game that is developed specifically for like PlayStation and Xbox, not necessarily for Switch, and then moving it over to those platforms. They showed some stuff, but not a ton. Like, they didn't sit down and show gameplay necessarily. It was interesting because it looked like seasons were changing on the fly. You had weather kind of hitting, that maybe that's part of it, real-time weather and lightning strikes and stuff. 2025. And while that sounds like it's a while away, I mean, technically it is, because it could be like the end of 2025. They could position this thing right next to Grand Theft Auto 6 or something, but I mean, we are right at the end of 2023, so I'd like to think that this will be first half of 2025, and we're maybe a bit over a year away, because they are going to show more information summer 2024, and that kind of sounds like, okay, we have kind of dropped the teaser here for you, let you know we're working on it, and then summer 2024, big news blowout for this game as we head towards maybe the first quarter even of 2025 to release it. Overall, looking at the Game Awards, I think it was maybe going to say like an hour too long. I think if this was just a really tight and concise 2-hour show, and I guess the pre-show, do you really need the pre-show? I'm not sure if you do necessarily. But if this went from 7:30, half an hour pre-show to 8 o'clock, and then 2 hours to 10 o'clock, I think it would have been a lot better. But then you wouldn't also be able to fit in a lot of different advertisements for a lot of mobile games, which I understand there is a lot of money involved in those, which also I'm sure flows nicely to the show through advertisement revenue. But that's the biggest thing, is I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, this is taking a while. So it's when it becomes noticeable that it's taking a while, like the first 45, 50 minutes, I feel like that went by pretty quick. But then the time just kept going and going, and it felt like it was slowing down. So 2 hours, I think, is the sweet spot for this kind of show. But otherwise, looking back at the reveals, I thought it was a pretty good night. The big standouts for me, obviously, Sega. I think that's really, really cool. Blade being a big one, and Final Fantasy 16 with the DLC, because I get to go play it right now. But let me know what you guys think about all of this down below. What were some of your favorite announcements? What about some of the awards and the winners, of course? Leave those comments down below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.